I want to start out just saying welcome, especially to our guests this morning. It's one of the things I really love about Easter. We get to see some faces that we don't see before, or we get to visit once a year, so it's good to have all of y'all. I've got to say that I want you to feel like you can fully participate in our worship, but you know what? Wow. That was great this morning. That's just... You know what? I don't think it's that our worship was any better. I think, at least for me, my heart was in an even better place. And when our heart is in the right place, worship is just so much more full. But I want to say, hey, if you're here this morning and your goal is to worship our Lord Jesus, then we will always have more in common than we could ever have not in common with each other. I want to tell you a little bit about our church. I love that we got the sign up. Thank you. That is good. We are a military church, if you haven't noticed that. And now I say military, we're not just Army. We do have Air Force here. We've even had Navy here at church. I know in the middle of Kansas, that's kind of crazy. Navy, Coast Guard. Haven't had any Marines be a part of our church yet. We're working on that. Any Marines here? Well, we had the crayons ready, so we were going to be okay. Hey, even Marines are welcome, right? I mean, like I said, if you're here to worship Jesus, we have more in common than we have not in common, even if you're a Marine. So we're military, and that is who we are. We're also unabashedly serious and driven by our commission to make disciples. That is why we are here. If you don't know, making disciples, that's a lot of work. It is messy. That's what life is. That's okay. And so we come, and as a church, we take our responsibility individually, and as a body, we take it seriously. Our responsibility to connect. We connect with God. We connect with one another. We connect with our neighbor. Our responsibility to grow. We're not here to just sit on the pews. We're supposed to grow. We grow in kingdom knowledge. We grow in kingdom responsibility and in kingdom faithfulness. And we serve. We serve with the love of God, with the grace of God, and with the giftedness that God gives each of us. Now, I know that's a mouthful. Honestly, if you really want to know what makes us tick, I'm going to say just come back on another week, talk to people. If you're looking for a place where you can get involved and it makes a difference, well, we'd love to have you back. That simple. Now, we've been in a study of the book of Exodus so far this year. That's a story where God uses Moses to free the Hebrew people from slavery in Egypt. It's the real story behind movies like the cartoon, Prince of Egypt. I mean, y'all seen that one? I haven't actually, yeah. The new one, Gods and Kings. Any of y'all seen Gods and Kings? Is it good? So I haven't seen that one yet either. If you're old school like me, it's Charles and Heston's Ten Commandments. I saw that every Easter growing up. Thank you. Yes. This is the real story those movies are based on. And what we're trying to do going through Exodus, we, like the Hebrews, want to see who God is. Because what you need to understand, it's the same God. The Old Testament God, the New Testament God, the today God is the same God. And so we're doing this study so He can reveal who He is, and also so He can point out to ourselves who we are, because we're really not that different from the Hebrews of some 3,300 years ago. They ask God for help. We ask God for help. They complain about the help they get. We complain about the help we get. Everything works out great, and so they praise Him, and then the next day they take Him for granted. I mean, they're just like us. So it's been a very enlightening study. I'm looking forward to the rest of it going forward. It's not very flattering for us, but we learn, right? But today's Easter. What are we supposed to talk about on Easter? He is risen. Yeah, the resurrection, right? You know the story. God became a human, right? He was born as a baby in a stable. We do that around Christmas, right? He lives about 30 years and He never sinned. That means he never did anything, thought anything, said anything that God would call wrong. He was perfect. So we killed Him, because that's what sinful people do with sinlessness. But that was actually God's plan. His plan was for Jesus to die in all of His perfection to pay for our fallenness, to pay for our sin. But 3 days later, what happened? That's right, he rose. You just want to make... You should have been at the 8 o'clock service. We made sure we covered that. Just for Dave. He is risen. Okay, now we can move on, Dave. You good? All right.
I want to wait there.
3 days later, he walked out of the grave alive. He was seen by a handful of women. Then he was seen by the disciples. Later, he's seen by more and more and more people. At one time, 500 people see him that he is risen. And that is what we're supposed to talk about on Easter, right? You know, I actually have some respect for people who only come to church on like Easter or Easter and Christmas. Because if you think about it, y'all people only hear one or two messages. And it's always the same story. That's got to get boring. Well, I got news for you. We actually, over the other 50 weeks of the year, unpack this whole Bible thing. Now, it's the same story, but we get to look at it in so many different ways. In fact, I've been here almost 9 years, and I counted it up. We've done 7 or 8 book studies. That's where, the Bible is a book of books. And we've gone through 7 or 8 books in the process of trying to understand what this resurrection really means to our lives. So if you want more than up from the grave he arose, come back on a regular week, because that's when we really start to unpack. In fact, we have just started the 10 plagues of Egypt. And if you want some stuff that really is going to make you have to dig in and think, that's it. But I get it, it's Easter. We're supposed to talk about the resurrection, but I want to talk about Exodus. That's where we've been. That's what I want to talk about. And if you're wondering how I'm going to manage to talk about Exodus on Easter and still keep my job, let me let you in on the secret. You ready? I guess not. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. It's the same story. The story of Exodus is the story of Easter. They are one in the same. You see, there's this God-sized idea that is woven throughout the whole Bible. He starts with these numbskull people, the Hebrews, back thousands of years ago, and we get to walk through their life together with the Bible. But in their story, we get to see the story of God's Son. We get to see God's plan, what God reveals in part in Exodus. He fulfills and makes clear in the Gospels through Jesus. The covenant that is established by the 10th plague, the Passover, that covenant is fulfilled by Jesus and transformed by Jesus in the new covenant, the New Testament that he establishes with his church. So Exodus is Easter. Easter is Exodus, and that's what I want us to see today. And so we're going to focus on one passage, a great Easter passage out of Exodus. Exodus chapter 6. If you want to go ahead and find that, we'll be in the first 8 verses. But if you haven't been with us, I'm going to catch you up while you're looking. Exodus chapter 6. So here's what's happened. God chose this hothead murderer called Moses. You may have heard of him. And he chose him to bring his people out of horrible slavery. And I say horrible slavery because for a generation, Pharaoh had literally been trying to work the Hebrews to death. He thought there were too many of them, and he wanted them to die. So he's doing that for a generation. Moses comes out of that, and then God tells Moses, I'm going to free my people, but Pharaoh will not listen. And because of that, I'm going to have to force the issue. Moses goes, he tells the Hebrews, hey, God says he's going to set us free. Everybody rejoices, they're happy. Then Moses goes to Pharaoh, and what's Pharaoh say? No. Did God tell him that? Yes, okay. And then Pharaoh doubles down on the persecution, the hardship of their life. The Hebrews blame Moses. Moses blames God, even though God had told them what? He's going to say no. Like I said, they're just like us. And that's where our passage picks up today. Moses has just literally gotten in God's face and said, it's your fault, I told you to pick somebody else anyway. Chapter 6. Get to cry. Then the Lord said to Moses, now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. For under compulsion he will let them go, and under compulsion he will drive them out of his land. God further spoke to Moses and said to him, I am the I am. I am Yahweh. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as God Almighty. But by my name, Yahweh, I did not make myself known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land in which they wandered. Furthermore, I have heard the groaning of the sons of Israel because the Egyptians are holding them in bondage, and I have not forgotten my covenant. Okay, basically, here's what that's saying. You're about to get to see my power. Here is my relational history with your people. But I want you to understand, I want to have a relationship with you today. So here is my relational name, Yahweh. I am that I am. Furthermore, he wants you to understand, I am faithful. And I remember my covenant. I remember my promises. And then he finishes, I want you to know that I care. I have seen what is happening. I know what is happening. I have not been ignoring my people and their cries. Verse 6. Say therefore to the sons of Israel, the I am that I am, that I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from their bondage. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and great judgments. Then I will take you for my people, and I will be your God. And you shall know that the I am that I am is your God, who brought you out from the burdens of the Egyptians. I will bring you to the land which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you for possession. I am Yahweh. Now I hope at this point you're really wondering, what in the world does that have to do with Easter? In those verses, God gives his people 7 I will statements. I will bring you out from under your burdens. I will deliver you from your bondage of slavery. I will redeem you with power and judgment. I will take you for my own. I will be your God. I will bring you to the promised land, and I will give it to you. I will, I will, I will. Friends, this is exactly what Jesus promised and did on the cross. Let's walk through each of these and you'll see what I mean. Let's start with the first one. I will bring you out from under the burden of the Egyptians. Okay, like I said earlier, for a generation Pharaoh had been trying to work the Jews to death. And at this point, they are making bricks for the cities that Pharaoh is building. So they spent all day, every day, digging up clay, getting it all wet and sloppy, forcing straw into it, and shaping bricks that they then probably dried out in the sun. All day, every day, year after year. And to make things worse, after Moses went to him the first time, Pharaoh stopped providing the straw. Up to that point, he had people who brought the straw to the Hebrews. Now he's like, okay, since you have so much time to talk about, God, y'all go find your own straw. And you couldn't reduce your quota. They had more than they could bear. They had even more heaped up on top of that, and they were powerless to do anything about it. This was their lot in life, and it sucked. And they were going to die making bricks. Their kids were going to die making bricks. Their grandkids were going to die making bricks. And God said, I'm going to take this impossible burden off of you. And that sounds a lot to me like what Jesus said in Matthew 11 when he said, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. I mean, it doesn't just say rest and cessation of work. The next verse says, take my yoke, take my burden, take my labor on you, and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke, again, my labor is easy, and my burden is light. The Hebrews labored under Pharaoh. You and I labor under sin, both of which are crushing burdens. But Jesus says, I will give you rest. work for me because I'm gentle, I'm humble. My burden, the work of serving me is comfortable. That's what easy means, is comfortable and light. He sets us free from the burden of our sin, of the debt that is impossible for us to pay. The next one, I will deliver you from bondage, from slavery, literally. Now, you need to understand the Hebrews didn't start out as slaves. In fact, when they first came to Egypt, Joseph, one of the sons of Israel, was the number 2 guy in the country. He saved Egypt from starvation, and because of that, he was like, Pharaoh did his thing, and Joseph ruled the country. So Israel, Jacob's family, all those 12 kids, and all their kids, were respected and loved, and they were given the best land. 400 years and several million Hebrews later, they were suffering some of the worst slavery the world has seen. And that's what happens. Yeah, sometimes slavery is sudden and comes into our lives. You know, like some African being snatched off of his continent and dragged into slavery in America. But other times, slavery is slow in our lives. And generation by generation, it creeps up on us. And we look back, and this generation looks back, and they wonder, how did we get here? The Hebrews had become enslaved to Pharaoh, under bondage to him and to his kingdom, just like we are apart from Christ. You see, without the grace that was purchased on the cross, you and I are enslaved to our sin. You might think, I'm not really enslaved to anything. Well, think about it. When temptation hits you, what do? When the temptation comes, hey, I'm going to go out and get drunk tonight. I'm going to go and watch some porn. Or, I think I can fit a 6th donut in here. What do? Well, maybe you resist for a little while, right? You stand strong. But in the end, where do you end up? Yeah. In the end, you're at the bar, you're at the computer, you're eating the 7th donut. That's slavery. When temptation comes and you have to obey. Your sin owns you. That's why Jesus had to die. He had to die to free us from slavery to sin. Here's what Paul says about this in Galatians chapter 5. It was for freedom that Christ set us free. Great. Therefore, keep standing firm and do not be subject again. Do not submit again to the yoke, there's that word again, to the labor, to the work of slavery. In other words, it keeps coming back into our lives. Don't let it consume you anew. Are you beginning to see how the language in all this is the same? The language of freeing God's people from Egypt is the same language he uses to talk about freeing us from sin. Let's keep going. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and great judgments. That outstretched arm, that's power. God is saying, I'm going to show my power. I'm going to bring judgment. And when God goes toe-to-toe with Pharaoh, it is no contest. God says, I will redeem you. Just sit back and watch. And you get 10 plagues. You get the parting of the Red Sea. You get Pharaoh's army going swimming. You get the pillar of smoke and fire. You get Mount Sinai and the 10 Commandments. You get all this amazing, awesome stuff where God is showing his power. He's showing who he is. And he's saying, I am God. That's what Jesus did. His name, Yeshua. It means Yahweh saves, redeems. And he comes in power and he reveals who God is. And we see miracles and healings. We see thousands fed. We see the dead raised. That's God's outstretched arm in power. And yet he allows himself to be brutally tortured and crucified. But 3 days later, he walks out of the grave. What did he have to say about that? John 12. This is Jesus talking about what's coming as he's about to be crucified. It says, "Now judgment is upon this world, and the ruler of this world will be cast out. And I, if I am lifted up, I will draw all people to myself." Sin, Satan, and evil of this world were judged and found lacking. They were cast out. The sentence of death is going to be carried out. Read the book of Revelation at some point. But today, what he's saying, between I was sent and the judgment, we are here in between, like Moses leading the people through the Red Sea. We are walking between slavery on one end and salvation on the other. And God has made a way for his people to be rescued. Ephesians 1:7. In him, Jesus, we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of our sin, according to the riches of his grace. He redeemed us. He purchased us. He sold himself through his death and his faithfulness, and has bought us for himself and has earned the right to be the judge of everyone. I will remove the burden. I will redeem you. Now these last four all go together. I will take you for my own. I will be your God. I will bring you into the promised land, and I will give the promised land to you. For this we have to jump to Revelation 21. This is the next to the last chapter in the Bible. This is the end. Judgment has happened. God's people have been set free once and for all, redeemed, delivered. And here's how it ends. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. There was no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne, so whose voice? God's, saying, listen to this, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is among men, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be among them, and he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will no longer be any death. There will no longer be any mourning or crying or pain, for those things have passed away." And he who sits on the throne said, "Behold, I am making all things new." And then, so we get it, he tells John, "Write this down, for these words are faithful and true." The promises of Exodus. I will take you for my own. I will make you my people. I will be your God, and I will bring you into the land and give it to you. That is what is ultimately fulfilled in Christ in Revelation at the end of days. He takes his people for himself. His people, his children, bought by the blood of Christ. He says, "I will be your God." In a way that says, "I will be your God, and there will not be any others. We have settled this. It is done." He says, "I have brought you into this promised land. A land where there's not going to be any more sin. There's not going to be any more pain. There's not going to be any more Pharaoh. And as I promised, I am giving it to you." It's just like what Jesus said right before he ascended back to heaven. He says, "I go to prepare a place for you, so that where I am, you may be also." He also goes on to say, "And if I go, and I am, I will return." The promises of Exodus are fulfilled ultimately, finally, forever in Jesus Christ. This is our story. This is Easter. This is Exodus. Call it what you want. And honestly, in some ways, every Sunday is the same story, isn't it? Yeah. It's the story we've been telling from the beginning. We are a people sold out to sin, enslaved, burdened, trapped, and longing to be free from it. But we realize there is nothing we can do that will cause Pharaoh to let us go. And so God, in His love and His grace, moved in power in the person of Jesus Christ to redeem us. He purchased us for Himself at great personal cost. And with the death of His only Son on the cross, He freed us from slavery. So the question really isn't which story we're going to tell on Easter. The question is, where are you in the story? Are you still pounding clay into bricks until you die, stuck under sin, in miserable conditions, just doing what you're forced to do? Are you crying out to God for relief? Are you trapped in that, but you want freedom? Or maybe you've gotten to the point where God is starting to move, and you're like, oh, I'm not sure I like the way you're doing this. And so you start to blame Him for the fact that you would have done things differently if you were saving yourself. Are you already walking out of slavery? Are you leaving Egypt behind and heading for the promised land? This is the story of Easter. This is the story of Exodus. We do not have to be slaves any longer. We can live in this life between Egypt and Canaan free. Our unpayable debt has been covered. We can live life in the loving presence of God and know the joy of His grace. I love, though, that the I Am of Exodus closes his whole Bible this way. This is the end of chapter 22 in Revelation. Behold, I am coming quickly, and my reward is with me to render to everyone according to what they have done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. I am the root and the descendant of David. I am the bright and morning star, and yes, I am coming quickly. Let's pray.